Welcome to the Dragon's Den. I'm your venerable host Orochi, and today we're going to be talking about the Impossible Lands and our first in-depth analysis of one of those specific places, Alkenstar. Alkenstar is basically what you presume as the Wild West of Galarian, because it's got guns, it's got wasteland, it's got the basic background for the kinds of things you think about when you're thinking about spaghetti western type stuff. Now, keep that in mind. We'll delve into that a little bit more later. But for now, we're just going to go over what the places are in the country that is considered Alkenstar, where they also have their capital called Alkenstar. So that can be a little bit confusing because I don't believe they consider themselves a country. The city of Alkenstar was originally founded by Ansel Alkenstar, by him being an inventor who made lots of clockwork stuff, and he managed to get all of the local tribes together and make peace and build the city together to be protected from the elements, the crazy wild magic stuff. They don't call it wild magic, but that's basically what it is. The war between Geb and Nex, at least the fallout from it, all survival basically. So all of these different groups of people coming together for their own survival, and they built this great city, which is, a fantastic story for any sort of survival stuff in wastelands. And we can see a nice little map here, which is all the mana wastes, and it shows as if there's tons of land up here, but this is pretty much Nex up here and Geb down here, because that's why I have Geb's Rest right there. I don't know why it doesn't say that on this map, because it sort of skews with your perception of what these things are a little bit. Because then if you think, oh, well, if this is not directly Nex's area and this is not directly owned by Geb, then why would you build your stuff in the worst place possible if there was even a little room outside of it? But there's not really any room, which is supposed to be the point. It is all of these people who are living in some of the harshest land on the planet coming together and forming this impressive city, and it's basically a steampunk dream where they have clockwork and steampunk and guns and all of that super cool fantasy technology kind of stuff. Because it's not real technology, because clockwork and all that sort of stuff doesn't actually really work like that. So it's very much a fantasy technology area, which is super cool. That's the whole theme of the Impossible Lands is, some of the higher versions of fantasy tropes taken to their extremes, which I think is super interesting, just in the fact that it's like, hey, if you want to go, super slapstick or super overboard with some of your tropes, then this is where you do it. If you want to go super hard on necromancy stuff, you go into Land of Gebs. If you want super high magic, you go into Nex. If you want more religious or spiritual or self-fulfillment kind of stuff, then you go to Jilmari. It's great that we have all of these options, and I'm probably going to reiterate that at the beginning of all of these videos, because that's the unifying theme of this whole area, that the Impossible Lands are just like the high end of going super deep on these themes. The biggest problem I have with Alkenstar and the mana wastes in general, it's like, it's cool that it's the wastes, it's deserty badlands, all that kind of stuff. And even just looking at this picture, it kind of gives you, that vibe. And you look at so many pictures of characters and stuff that you can't help but think of spaghetti westerns, especially when you have the AP that is set in Alkenstar is called Outlaws of Alkenstar. My group is almost at this time. We've just about finished going through the AP, and we lost one of the long-term players playing through it because none of us are really enjoying it all that much. And I believe the big reason for that is because the setting of Alkenstar and the portrayal of a lot of the characters in it, and especially in the AP and stuff, make you think of spaghetti westerns. The mana wastes and Alkenstar have nothing whatsoever to do with spaghetti westerns. Far, far from it. And I think that is the big problem with all this stuff, is you see people dressed up as cowboys and you think, oh, hey, they got guns, we got 6-shooters, we've got outlaws. You've got the beginning of Outlaws and Alkenstar starts with you robbing a bank. So how can you not immediately start thinking of spaghetti western tropes? And you can't do that because that's nothing in the AP, and nothing in this book either even vaguely suggests spaghetti western themes. Because if you look at this whole area, we realistically only have 3 locations. We have Dongun Hold, the great massive city of Alkenstar, and the smaller city of Martel. That's it. Spaghetti westerns are all based on low amounts of travel. Well, high amounts of travel, but lots of tiny little towns that don't have constant connection with each other, that are far enough away that you don't want to travel between them very much, and having like a rail system that goes through, so that's the only contact you have with greater society. That's what like the backbone of spaghetti westerns. There's none of that here because we just have a massive metropolis level city and a massive metropolis underground city full of dwarves, and then just a regular trade city on the waterfront. That's all we have. So I think that is what the problems are with Outlaws of Alkenstar. And if you come into this with those kind of views of spaghetti westerns, this will also not help you get into this Alkenstar section, because you're just thinking of tropes that do not exist here. What Alkenstar is, it is steampunk. They do not have enough steampunk visualization in any of their artwork for Alkenstar, or in the Outlaws of Alkenstar AP that I've been able to see, that really gives you the feel of what Alkenstar is like. And little bit of a spoiler, just stuff like this, but a little bit of a spoiler for the AP. You fight lots and lots of clockwork, because you can see here you've got clockwork guards, and that is the big thing with Alkenstar, is that Ansel Alkenstar was a clockwork engineer. And so all of the artwork for this needs to heavily lean, much more heavily lean on steampunk aspects, because there's clockwork all over the place. They should have high levels of technology. They do. That's the whole thing, is like high levels of tech. But in a fantasy world, when you say high levels of tech, it's like, well, that could mean so much. Whereas even compared to spaghetti westerns, where the by far the highest piece of technology is guns, everything else is low tech, Alkenstar is different because it is high levels of technology. You should have servants and droids. You have more in common with Star Wars from Alkenstar than spaghetti westerns, because they both draw on the spaghetti western themes of, you know, outlaws and going against corruption and that kind of cool stuff. And there's lots of servants. There's droids, and you've got clockwork of every type, guards, cleaners. You cannot understate how much this artwork does not portray enough in my mind, and any of the stuff that I've seen, of how much clockwork should be in all of this, and how it doesn't really play up enough the themes of steampunk, because it is immensely steampunk, even drawing in that the city itself is very, very corrupt, which is kind of a point of the Impossible Lands in general, is that all of these places are corrupt. They're headed by, because they're centers of power, the upper echelons are very corrupt, and you definitely have, you know, your tiers of power where the strong subjugate the weak. You have that in all of these places. There is no, you know, glorified safe haven of goodness in the Impossible Lands at all. And that's sort of a difficult thing, I think, to really take in, because you always want to look at an area and go, oh, hey, this is where all the good people are, because you want good people who run a place that can be like a safe haven, especially for an adventuring group. You want a place where they can start where, you know, there's probably good people there. Because starting in corrupted areas where you know that the social and economic elite are all corrupted and the whole system benefits them, that's sort of... that brings a lot of themes that a lot of players might not want to deal with. But that is heavily what Alkenstar is, because a lot of the guards are corrupt. That's kind of one of the starting aspects of the AP, is you fighting against that corruption, but not in a way that was really satisfying for my group, which I think was unfortunate. But there's got to be better ways for this artwork to really scream more steampunk to me, because that is heavily what all of Alkenstar is about. It's about the lower class, poor people that are being subjugated by the rich in an area that heavily favors skill. And so anybody who's smart enough and skilled enough to build things can generally get ahead in life. And so you'd think with that sort of motivation, it would be easier in those sorts of lands to get ahead and not be put down so much. But here we are. So... super ultra steampunky with all of the, like, steampunk aspects that are sort of very often overlooked in steampunk, because you look at cyberpunk and government corruption and corporate corruption is like one of the cornerstones of what cyberpunk is all about. Well, steampunk is the same way, that it's generally about corporate government corruption and special groups that hold power and all that sort of stuff. That's why there's usually so many, you know, that's the whole punk aspect. And I think it gets overlooked a lot in steampunk, and it's great for Alkenstar to really uphold those core fundamentals of what steampunk is about. Just visually, I don't think that it really sets that up well enough. But once you know it and you can start looking at it from that angle, I think that'll help a lot to get into what Alkenstar is all about, and really help with Outlaws of Alkenstar, the AP, because it definitely feeds into a little bit of those tropes. And then you move out of the city and you go to Mattel, and it's basically just a massive storefront city. It's a trade hub on the water. But it's kind of hard to think of a trade hub when you don't have tons of other cities, and you probably don't have a huge amount of travelers coming to the Mana Wastes from other places in Galarian, especially since you're surrounded by two superpowers that also aren't exactly inviting to other people. So that's kind of weird for me. But then you immediately go to Dongon Hold. And we got a nice little map here. You get this map in Outlaws of Alkenstar, and there's some problems with an early description of what you have to do in one of the objectives, which is kind of unfortunate. And it sort of hits on that a little bit here, but doesn't really clear it up too much. But you just look at this and it's like, yeah, this is a massive city. This is not in any way, shape, or form spaghetti western styled, smaller places. It's a massive walled city that is heavily fortified and ready to take on armies of enemies, which is super cool if that's the sort of thing you're looking at. But here we have Dongun Hold, which has been here for a lot longer, and Ansel managed to make a deal with these dwarves against their general consensus. Their king made a deal with them, and despite all of her counsel saying that she should not treat with this man or any of the rabble that he had with them, because they were just a whole bunch of random clans and tribes that he managed to get together, but she saw that there was value in unity, especially since their lands are surrounded by two magical superpowers. And they basically traded technologies, because all Ansel had with him was he was an engineer, so he built clockwork. And the dwarves were masters of firearms, so they basically traded their two amazing technologies with each other and dramatically improved each other's strengths, which I think is such a cool thing, to have two groups that each have different non-magical technologies at such a level that when they came together made them just immensely more powerful. That's such a cool binding agent for them. I really love that story. And you got a whole section of here what all these dwarves are like and what it's like to live there, what characters are like from there, which is really, really interesting. If you want to get into any of this sort of information, buy this book. It's super good. I cannot overstate how awesome the Lost Omens books are for getting into lots of different lore stuff. And let's see, we're going to go down here and we're going to see new options. Adventuring in Alkenstar. Here's some equipment. You can get Alkenstar Ice Wand. You can get a plated duster because, spaghetti western themes, which are sort of... They don't not fit in steampunk, but they could have put in a lot of other stuff that fits. Like Pocket Watch. Pocket Watch is super cool. Got wrench gear. Get a new pet you can get. New animal companion. Water wraiths. That's a water wraith right there. It's super weird looking, but it's like a mutant reptile, which is super cool. Like, who doesn't want that? You probably don't, because most animal companions have massive, massive problems that still have not been fixed and that they do not scale up well. This is strength and dex, so it's automatically a bad companion. If you don't have +3 base dex as a minimum for an animal companion, it will not scale well into late game. Like after level 14 or something, they will nosedive in effectiveness because you cannot build strength-based animal companions into the higher levels. It's literally impossible. Their AC suffers by like 6 points, which is just unacceptable. You can't be 6 points behind an AC. You're going to get destroyed. And they have no upsides for that loss. And they've added new things to animal companions, but all they have to do is upgrade the specializations to all include +1 strength, because all of the dex ones have +1 dex, whereas not all the strength-based ones have +1 strength, which is nonsensical. And then they need to make it so that strength-based animal companions, especially when they pick up their specializations, can get expert or mastery in armor, and that would basically fix your problems. You just got to get those numbers up. That's all they got to do, and it's not really that hard. It's kind of simple changes, but for whatever reason, they're not doing it. But support benefits, your water wraith hisses and changes colors swiftly in an iridescent clash, overwhelming your foes in an avalanche of shades and hues. So it's a sparkly little dancing ball. It's a disco ball. Until the start of your next turn, each time you hit a creature within your water wraith's reach, the creature is dazzled for 1 round, which is decent. It's not great, but it's all right. And then Blood Gulp Blood. Water Wraith's last action was a successful Jaws attack against a foe. The Water Wraith gains 2d8 temporary hit points that last for 1 round, and the foe takes 2d6 persistent bleed damage. If the Water Wraith has a specialization, the Water Wraith gains 3d8 and does 3d6 persistent bleed. I don't like that none of these things with animal companions go up beyond specialization, because only 1 bump when it probably could have 2 or 3 bumps up as you level them. I don't know. Animal companions are just really weak at late game, and I always look for any reason to make them stronger. And then we've got a specific class archetype for gunslingers. Well, it's basically just another way, not a true archetype. But Way of the Trigger Brand, which basically just allows you to use their specific weapon, which is a combination weapons to more effectiveness because a lot of people have seen that combination weapons just aren't very good. Like, at all. They're super thematic, but they're not really powerful because you can just put a melee weapon on your gun as an attachment, and then you don't ever have to switch because it's just always there. But it gets all the stuff, and it's decent. It's not great, but it's decent. Then we got a new archetype, Shield Marshal, which is kind of weird. It basically just makes you a Marshal and Alkenstar, part of their military force, their guards. And like most small, heavily themed archetypes, it's not really powerful. But it's there, and it's got stuff. So there's that. And that is all of Alkenstar. It's great, fun stuff. All of these options are in Path Builder, so not really exposing anything here. And you can make characters with these already, so that's great. And I would say go out and do so, because having groups of characters in the AP for Alkenstar, Outlaws of Alkenstar, I think would have been a lot more entertaining if everybody had known to make steampunk themed characters instead of spaghetti western themed characters. That would have been a first step towards enjoying it more. But it's also, I don't want to sound so negative about it, but the theming for it is kind of just all over the place, where you just sort of, you become outlaws, but you've also are just mercenaries, and you're just doing jobs, and you have absolutely no input on what you do through the entire thing. You just get a job set in front of you, and you're like, oh, you got to do this thing. And then it moves on to you got to do that next thing. And it's just a chain of events that you follow. And I get it. That's generally how APs run. But this one felt more railroady and more poorly railroading than most of the others, just because the reasoning for it really doesn't mesh well with the kind of themes you might be looking for. That's definitely how it was for my group. So I would probably suggest, if you want to run cool steampunk sort of stuff in Alkenstar and the Mana Wastes, I would probably say do it homebrew. There's some more stuff in here about things from the Mana Wastes. I don't know why it's not in the Alkenstar section, but it's way down here at the bottom after Jalmari. But we'll be getting into that stuff much later. If anybody likes Outlaws of Alkenstar, let me know why. What you thought of it, what your group was, themes your group was built around and stuff. It's cool to share those kind of things. My group didn't really enjoy it, or we've been struggling through it quite a bit, which is very unfortunate. And then next week we will be going into, I'll do a quick, probably very quick video on Bopan. It's super interesting, and I haven't seen anything like it anywhere else, so that's why we'll hit on it for a little bit. But it's kind of a small section, so we'll just do a quick video on it. Then we'll get right into big old Gab. But that is it for now. Have a great evening.